It's a pleasure to be here today to share what in many cases would truly be considered war stories. A lot of times the ammunition that was being used obviously was very much live, it just wasn't lethal. And so I'm hoping that I can share with you how to duck, run for cover, and maybe give you some ideas from some of the successes I've had in what we might be able to do to make intermunicipal relationships work a lot better over time. So one of the things that has been become a big part of my practice is I like to read the great quotes from people and figure out how they fit into what I'm trying to do. And I think Omar Bradley understood very clearly after he led the Allied armies at Normandy exactly what this was all about. Because he had great experience, but he learned from some very bad experiences in order to have good judgment. And so I'm going to share with you, I'm going to start off today and talk about the 4 C's. And I'm going to start off by talking about some of the places where, like Omar Bradley, I learned from some bad mistakes. So the first place I'm going to talk about is some fringe planning that I did back when I was a young planner. I had working for the Regional District of East Kootenay in BC. I had just completed two very successful official community plan updates, one for an unincorporated area and another one for the adjacent municipality. Anybody here ski in Fernie? Okay. Anybody stay in Fernie? Okay, you're welcome, all right? I did the OCP that allowed that kind of resort development to come in place. Before that, there was only an interest in the ski hill operator, and there was nobody who believed that anybody would ever come to Fernie to stay. So you're welcome, all right? Well, nice that you appreciate the great planning work done almost 40 years ago. So I complete those projects, and I'm now given an opportunity to do a fringe area plan outside the city of Cranbrook. And being an enthusiastic young planner, I assumed that my communication with the director of planning for the city of Cranbrook was really all the interaction that I needed at an intermunicipal level in order to move this plan forward. And I had several opportunities to talk about this fringe plan that I was doing. I was invited to a Rotary Club meeting, and I was invited to a couple of other places. And I assumed everything was going along swimmingly. I was out talking to residents and other places, running all around the area around the city of Cranbrook. We really hadn't talked to anybody other than my colleague in the planning department. And lo and behold, I come to a regional district board meeting, and I'm sitting there, and the city representative from Cranbrook stands up and feeds me back all of the great principles that I've been talking about communication, and how the one participant and interested party stakeholder with the most interest in this fringe plan hadn't been talked to. And that was her and her council. And so I made the mistake. I was sitting there. So, you know, I don't know how many times you've heard a politician feed you back some of the great professional advice that you've given, right? And I'm sitting there listening to her, and I'm not realizing that she's criticizing me. I'm thinking she's really repeating back to me the really good stuff I'm saying, and I make the mistake of smirking while I'm sitting in front of the board. And she looks at me and she goes, "You're smirking," and my boss was sitting beside me, and I thought he was going to fall out of his chair. "What'd you do?" How do you stand up and apologize, or speak into a microphone and apologize for having a politician finally agree with you on something, and realize that in fact, at the same time that you had just made the great error, that in fact you hadn't talked to the biggest stakeholder in the room, and they were your intermunicipal partner that was either going to live or die from a boundary extension perspective with all the great planning that you were doing on the fringe. So I survived that meeting, and I moved on, and we adopted the ASP, but I tried not to make that mistake again for about 15 years. Now, for those of you who have practiced in BC, and you know about my career, I was first manager, then director of development services at the regional district of Comox-Strathcona. And as Tracy Corbett can tell you, that at one point in time, the regional district of Comox-Strathcona was known as the most dysfunctional local government in Canada. And I happened to be the director of planning at that point in time. It's my first manager/director gig. I come in, I've got a board that really wants to do some great planning. The province of BC has just recently brought in the regional planning initiatives, and I see this amazing opportunity to do a sub-regional plan for the Comox Valley that actually respects a watershed. Like, wow, when was the last time we did plans that actually respected a watershed? And bring this forward. I've got a board that puts tons of money, biggest budget on a project that I've ever seen in current dollars, probably almost $1 million. It was put forward for me at that time. This is 1993. And we're going to go out and we're going to do this right. And so we hired Dwayne Platter-Zyberg to lead a charrette. We had surveys. We went into schools. We went into seniors' residences. We were on street corners. We opened a downtown shop. We had all of this engagement going. Over 10,000 identified people were involved in this process, and there's only about 40,000 residents in the whole area. And it was a fantastic process, except I didn't talk to the town of Comox and the city of Courtenay in any official way. They're members on the board, and if you know BC regional districts, the municipal members sit on the board, and so they were being briefed constantly on what we were doing and all the great things that were happening, and there was really not an awful lot of direct engagement with those folks. I mean, they're right there. They could ask whatever questions they wanted. Again, I talked to my planning colleagues at the city and at the town, and yeah, they thought that was a pretty good idea, but boy, when that document hit the board table, it was sort of like 50 pounds of lead landing on the table. And the fact that what we hadn't considered in the whole process, while considering landowners and stakeholders and considering the citizens' ideas, we really hadn't spent a lot of time considering, again, the municipal expansion interests of the two biggest municipalities, Comox and Courtenay. And then we had also succeeded quite admirably in offending the smallest of the three municipalities, which was the historic mining community of Cumberland, which was probably our biggest supporter in the Comox Valley, because not only hadn't we talked to the big guys, we really hadn't spent even any time at all thinking about the poor little village of Cumberland. I mean, who cares about a village of 2,000 people? So the needless to say, that sub-regional plan didn't get adopted. And I had to account for the fact that I had wasted about that $1 million worth of fees doing this amazing process that went absolutely nowhere. Probably the fact that I kept my job was the fact that nobody burned this in effigy that day when it came before the board. But it was a fact, it was a great error on my part, and again, not engaging, communicating, coordinating with more than just my professional colleagues, but making certain that those major intermunicipal stakeholders had a major part to play. Now, in both instances, both Cranbrook and now with Comox-Strathcona, the politics of that engagement would have been difficult. I'm a planner. In one case, I'm a brand new manager of planning. In the other case, I'm a junior planner. Pretty tough for me in my position to get that kind of engagement traction. But to have ignored it completely was probably not a great option on my part. I began to learn from my lessons, though, while I was in Comox-Strathcona, and I brought that with me to Alberta. When it came to boundary extensions, when I was on the other side, when I wasn't on the rural side, when I was on the urban municipality side, I was faced in both High River and the village of Cumberland, I was faced with a request to expand my boundaries, to do annexation in Alberta language, municipal boundary extension in BC language. And as you know, annexations or boundary extensions are probably singularly the most contentious driven issues that you can bring before municipal councils, particularly rural municipal councils, when you're trying to take over the land that they assume. So having just recently, probably in the Cumberland case, probably about 4 years before that, having survived the sub-regional planning fiasco, I decided if I was going to do a boundary extension that the village of Cumberland required, that not only was it necessary to talk to the landowners, which is really a major part of, in the BC context, you've got to get the lands that you're looking to extend the boundaries around to agree with you. This had to be a transparent, open, fully communicative, coordinated program. Otherwise, we were going to I was going to wind up eating the same kind of program that I had just launched when I was with the regional district, now I was with the village. I was going to get that fed back to me. So over the course of 6 months, we held the biggest public engagement process around an annexation that my guess is that certainly a village has ever undertaken. We did the research on what the costs were going to be to carry out the annexation. We did the research on what the economic benefits were going to be. We had the landowners submit their information about it. We talked with this information at the regional district level so that no director in the Comox Valley was without the information about exactly what was going to happen, what was exactly going to be the impact on the regional district. We included how the annexation would actually allow the regional district to incorporate some of its development initiatives within the land that was being taken over, because the village had some ability to provide services the regional district did not. And so we actually addressed our colleagues' concerns in the annexation and the boundary extension. It was uncontested. I thought finally I had discovered the right way to proceed. So when I came to Alberta and I took on the town manager position at the town of High River, there was an annexation that was sitting around, and Jose can remember that annexation that was sitting out on the west side. Some of that land flooded, by the way, in the last flood. In fact, most of the land flooded. But there was also some land on the east side of the town, and we looked at, do we proceed with a 3 or 4 quarter section annexation that only partly covers the growth initiatives and the needs of the town, or do we in fact do something that is bigger and broader and actually take it out to the public and explain to them what we were in fact trying to achieve with the annexation, and actually engage the MD board council in that whole discussion. And so we had, through Inter-Municipal Affairs Committee, we had extensive discussions about what was being proposed. We talked about the costs, about the benefits, about the strategies for achieving this. We listened to what the MV Council had to say. We reduced the annexation size in a couple of areas. From a planning perspective, probably not the best decision that we made, but what it led to was a coordinated agreement for an uncontested annexation. Wow. Two examples out of a 43-year career doing it right. That's not bad. Two out of 43. But the best case example that I think I learned tons from, and I hope you do, was what was in fact as close to a shooting war as you can get, and that was about 8 years ago. And I was the Director of Development Services at Red Deer County, facing off against my good friend Richard Harker. Richard, are you here today? No? Bill Shaw's there. He was watching from a distance at the time. So what we've got is the battlefield. We've got hard urban development smack against grain fields. It just doesn't. That's the whole urban-rural interface issue in a picture. And so we just completed a municipal development plan for Red Deer County. We had what was we thought was a really viable hamlet that we could develop. Some of you are familiar with it. It's called Gasoline Alley. And we also had the old military base, Springbrook, just a couple kilometers down the road. Our MDP talked about, and I think quite wisely talked about, the need for the county to centralize its services. Rather than continuing to expand rural sprawl in acreage subdivisions that were high demands, high service demands, what we needed to do was actually start to look at how we could create livable areas in places where there were existing services as much as possible. The linchpin to us deciding to move forward with some type of a compact development, we actually had the Mistakis Institute here in Calgary at Mount Royal University, then at the U of C, do something called the Cost of Community Services Study. The Cost of Community Services Study was something that we imported from the States. We had one of our counselors go down to a conference in the States, heard about these studies, brought back the idea, and basically what the Cost of Community Services Study did is it took a snapshot of revenues and expenses in one tax year. And it attributed the revenues to a particular land use, and the very general categories, residential, commercial, industrial, and then working, which would have been farms. And then the costs to those as well. And the cost of those services, it was astonishing. Now, you have to understand also that it reflects the tax regime of the time in the county. But residential, country residential services, which we had just spent probably a decade expanding the number of residential lots that were available in Redwood County, for every dollar of revenue they brought in, they took $1.51 of taxes to support them. Oh, country residential doesn't pay its way. Commercial, and largely that would have been in places like Gasoline Alley where there were compact services, it was pretty much dollar in and dollar out, about 95 cents of revenue in return for a dollar's worth of services for commercial. Working farms were pretty close to being break-even as well, because now we're talking about largely gravel roads. You don't have sewer and water, garbage pickup, or anything like that going out. The cost of keeping those roads up was pretty much equivalent to the cost of the revenue coming in from the farmers. But it was industry that was carrying the freight for the county. For every dollar of revenue, industry in the county got a nickel worth of services. And suddenly the council started taking a look at this and going, wow, how do we change this? And so we said, well, the way to change it is to create more services and more compact residential development in a small town setting. Our hamlets were doing well. People liked living in the hamlets. And we said, why don't we take Gasoline Alley and why don't we turn that into the Sherwood Park of Redwood County? Great idea. Hold that picture. In parallel to that, the city of Red Deer is looking at its growth plans. All right? And it's saying, well, that old IDP really doesn't reflect what we think we are going to need to grow in the next 30 or so years. And county, you've sort of locked this in a couple of places. We'd really like to grow across Highway 2, and you guys have gone out and developed that as industrial parks. That makes it kind of tough on us. But we're going to grow to 300,000 people. That's going to be us, and 300,000 people. Oh, well, it sure looks like Gasoline Alley is pretty much taken over by the city of Red Deer. And so the two sets of development initiatives being prepared fairly independently. Now, I will say that with the MVP, we had invited the city to participate. Sylvan Lake, Innisfail, all of the rural municipalities were invited to take part in that.